Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly a bit of a disturbing document. It's a detailed report that breaks down a system of psychological pressure called gestures as war. We're going to deconstruct how this system allegedly works, and more importantly, what the report says you can do to fight back. Let's get right into it. So, have you ever seen something in your neighborhood that just felt off? An odd gesture from a stranger, or maybe a weird noise that happens at the exact same time every night. This report kicks off with that very question. At what point do these little things stop being just coincidences and start looking like a pattern? And this document actually gives that pattern a name: gestures as war. It defines it as a kind of psychological warfare that literally weaponizes everyday life. We're talking about using nonverbal cues, gestures, even people in the neighborhood like vendors or workers, all to destabilize a person in their own home. And look, this isn't just some wild theory. The whole thing is built on 3 solid years of documented surveillance. It's that long-term, detailed observation that allow the author to map out the entire system, all the recurring tactics and strategies we're about to walk through. All right, so here's our game plan for this breakdown. First, we're going to analyze the attack itself, the 3-phase method they use, and the network of actors behind it all. Then, we're going to completely flip the script and dive into the defense, looking at the report's in-depth guide to counter-surveillance and how it turns you from a target into an observer. So, how in the world is an operation like this actually put into motion? Well, according to this document, it's not random at all. It lays out a very clear 3-phase strategic attack. Let's dig into the mechanics. It all starts with intelligence gathering. They're profiling the target, mapping their environment, figuring out their routines. Then comes phase 2, the psyops, or psychological operations, which are tailored specifically to that person's profile. And finally, the execution is handled by what they call a decentralized cadre, a system designed for total plausible deniability. And the level of detail in this psyops phase is wow. The report claims the tactics are actually gender-specific. For female targets, the goal is what it calls a breach of safety. This involves crude, coordinated gestures, often from laborers, who will intentionally avoid eye contact, making the whole thing both aggressive and impossible to confront directly. For male targets, it shifts to territorial aggression. This includes tactics like sustained fixed staring, which the document labels asset tracking, and something called acoustic war, like loud bike stunts happening at odd hours of the night. So you have to be wondering, who are the people actually carrying all of this out? Well, this is where the report introduces this concept of the cadre system, a structure that is built from the ground up for plausible deniability. This system is basically designed to be a ghost. An instigator gives the orders and then, poof, they're gone. The actions are carried out by what they call mobile assets. Think temporary workers, delivery guys, people who are just doing a small part and have no idea what the big picture is. They operate in these legal gray areas, using harassment instead of physical assault, which makes it incredibly hard to report. The ultimate goal? To create this constant, unnerving feeling that you are being watched by an enemy you just can't see or name. Okay, so that's the threat model. It sounds pretty intense. But the entire second half of this report is a detailed manual for defense. And this is where the dynamic completely flips, from you being the target to you becoming the observer. And this is absolutely crucial. The defense begins with a psychological shift. The report argues that you have to stop reacting emotionally, with fear, with anger, because that is exactly the reaction they want. Instead, you have to start acting like an analyst. You move from being the target to being the observer, and you treat every single event not as a personal attack, but as a data point. And this is exactly how you do that. The report provides this template for an evidence log to build what it calls a matrix of intent. You don't just log what happened, you log who did it, what your action might have triggered, and the exact time. By doing this, you transform what feels like isolated, random incidents into a clear, undeniable pattern of synchronized behavior. Now, along with logging everything, the report recommends some very practical deterrents. Publicly and calmly filming the actors can completely change the power dynamic. Hardening your perimeter with HD cameras and reflective window film denies them the ability to stare in. You could even inform labor contractors about specific recurring behaviors to disrupt their supply of assets. And sometimes, something as simple as motion sensor floodlights can eliminate the shadows they need to operate in. Okay, so the final section of this document basically synthesizes all of this into a clear standard operating procedure, or SOP. This is the playbook for turning all of that data you've been collecting into a decisive defense.
The checklist kicks off with your immediate response. What to do right in the middle of an event. First, and this is the hardest part, stay neutral. An emotional reaction is what they're after. Second, break their gaze, but not by just looking away. Instead, observe them indirectly, using your phone camera or a mirror. And third, just quickly confirm your physical perimeter is secure. Gates locked, windows shielded.
Next up is what the report calls tactical documentation. Activate your recording, capture the actor, the gesture, the whole context. The report also advises you to look for a signaler. That might be a nearby resident who seems to be observing or even coordinating the interaction. And of course, timestamp absolutely everything. Data is your weapon. And when you're ready to actually report this, the document gives you precise, powerful language to use. Instead of saying something like, "My neighbor keeps staring at me," you use the system's own terminology. This specific phrase frames the issue not as a personal dispute, but as a coordinated strategic campaign. And that right there is the final step. You take your evidence log, your whole matrix of intent, and you present it to the authorities as a single, coordinated harassment campaign. Your meticulous data collection makes it almost impossible to dismiss as just a series of unrelated, minor annoyances. You know, this entire report, whether you see it as a real-world manual or a theoretical exercise, it really leaves us with a compelling question. In an age where our homes are more connected than ever, maybe the new front line for our personal security isn't our front door anymore, but our own perception of the world around us.